Are there any formal apologies not already recorded? Democratic Services.
Morning, Provost. Yeah, we've got apologies from Mr. Bourne and Mrs. Morton, and also from Fiona Robertson.
Thank you for that. Noted. In terms of the order of business, councillors will be aware that the replacement paper 8.2 regarding Ukraine has now been circulated. I
think Fiona Robertson's now in the meeting, Chair.
That's a relief that she has to speak to some of the papers later on. We also have a late paper 8.10 regarding pupil intake, which you should have seen. At the end of the public session, there'll be an opportunity for the group leaders to comment and give tributes to those councillors that we know will not be standing at the May the 5th election. Other than that, the order is as stated. Are there any declarations of interest now or at any point? Do we have, therefore, any comments on the minutes? Item 5. Could I see someone propose the adoption of the minutes?
I move adoption, Provost.
Thank you, Councillor Muirhead, and I think seconded by Councillor Hackett. Thank you for that. There being no questions to the council leader and no motions, we can proceed to the public reports. 8.1, the single Midlothian Plan Performance Report. Can I call on the Chief Executive, Grace, at pages 9 to 42.
Thank you very much, Provost. So this report is a retrospective performance report which has been approved by the Community Planning Board for submission to Council. As members know, we adopted a community planning approach to the management of the pandemic, launching the Kindness Midlothian campaign just before the first lockdown back in March 2020, quickly setting up the hubs to support both our vulnerable children and the children of key workers, and of course the rapid adaptability of staff to undertake alternative duties as we carried out our key role as Category 1 responders to care for the vulnerable, liaise with our resilience partners and to support economic recovery. Given that this is the last council of this electoral term, Provost, I would like to take this opportunity as Chief Executive to thank the communities of Midlothian, all our elected members, our staff and our partners for the humanity, kindness, care and compassion which was shown throughout this unprecedented period. The efforts were nothing short of heroic, and my sincere thanks to everyone involved.
Thank you very much. It's certainly the case that the amount of flexible working was far beyond anything that had been experienced in public life in Scotland during this period, and I'd like to add my tributes as Provost to all the hard work that has gone in the third sector, the voluntary sector, as well as our own excellent staff. Could I have comments from Councillor Muirhead?
Thanks, Provost. As chair of the Community Planning Partnership, I just want to say a few words on this paper. As the Chief Executive said, the last 2 years in particular have been extremely challenging, and the Midlothian Community Planning Partnership have risen to these challenges. They've worked together, cooperating across government agencies and with their communities to help protect their residents during this awful pandemic. I would like to, as Grace has, thank all those involved for their efforts in achieving this and for the performance they've managed to record in this report. I think the one important thing moving forward is that we don't let the combined problem-solving, pragmatic and practical approaches that we've taken during the pandemic to dissipate. I think that's the kind of approach we need to continue with in the Community Planning Partnership. Whether that be within the council where we've seen services working together, people changing their jobs so that they can move to roles that were more required at the time, that were more pressing at the time, or in the wider partnership agencies in the third sector, working with communities. It was within the communities themselves, though, that I think we saw the best examples of people coming together to look after each other. And at the end of the day, that's what it's all about. That's why we're there. Thanks, Provost.
Comment to that. Can I now ask Councillor Cassidy to comment?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'd just like to echo the words of Grace and Jim, and I'd also like to add that my thanks to Grace for her leadership during this as the Chief Executive, and for the way she's conducted the council and kept us all in the loop with everything that's been happening as it's unfolded. She's done the hard miles here, and I can't imagine how difficult her job has been trying to coordinate and keep this ship on track. So I'd like to extend my thanks to the Chief Executive. Thank you.
Thank you for that contribution. There being no further comments, can I commend this report to the councillors, and we subsequently move to item 8.2, the replacement paper regarding Ukrainian refugee relocation. Can I ask Kevin Anderson to speak to this?
Thank you, Provost. Members will have received the replacement paper, as you've referenced, in what is a continually developing situation in the war being waged in Ukraine and the humanitarian effort currently taking place. This report is for members' consideration in facilitating arrivals into Midlothian of Ukrainian people displaced due to the current military conflict. And I advise that the routes into the UK are by visa schemes rather than a resettlement scheme, which has been the established route for previous Syrian and Afghan arrival efforts in Midlothian. The details of the family visa and sponsorship routes are listed in the report, and these are new arrangements and an approach that is distinctly different, as the resettlement approach has ensured matching and arrangements are in place in advance for accommodating, and a triage assessment is carried out of needs for any arrivals. Section 4 of the report references the family visa option. In the family visa route, it is expected that immediate or extended family will accommodate the arrival, but that is not necessarily the case, and as Ukrainians will at least have a leave to remain as a minimum status, they will then have recourse to public funds. So access to public services, including homelessness and housing, are available to them. The other route is for sponsorship in the unique Homes for Ukraine scheme. And Section 5 of the report details currently the Phase 1 period, which is in place and allows individual sponsors to match with named Ukrainians. In a further phase of the UK government scheme, community groups, churches and other organisations can also sponsor Ukrainian guests, as there is no capped number. There's also a variation as part of the Homes for Ukraine scheme, which is available in Scotland, with the Scottish Government acting as a super sponsor, and that process is noted in Summary Section 3 and detailed in Appendix B of this report. The role of councils in the scheme is listed in Section 6, and while we do have experience in managing the challenge and the risk from prior resettlement scenarios, during the approach here, we have no sense of the scale that will be required, but some sense of our capacity as we work our way through and around the support and care required for arrivals, and also anticipating where some of those arrangements may actually break down. The funding tariff to councils is expected to match the resettlement schemes as they stand, and it's noted in Section 9 of the report. Education cost guidance is to follow, with Scottish Government also providing guidance for any variations or alignment to the UK provisions. As it's indicated, welcome hubs are to be established, and local authorities which have port access through sea and air, as arrivals are already being received through existing means, and others through the common travel area via the Republic of Ireland through Dublin onto Belfast and then Cairnryan. Provost Council is requested to note the report and also recommended to approve delegated authority to address any changing circumstances in what is a very fluid situation, if members indeed agree to facilitate the Ukrainian arrivals. Thank you.
Thank you. So this is a report for noting, but also for a decision regarding delegated authority as set out at paragraph 1, the recommendations. Councillor Curran.
Thanks, Provost, and thanks for the paper, Kevin. I mean, Provost, there's not much that I can add to this that hasn't already been said in terms of the humanitarian tragedy. But what we can all do is take action, and we're in a privileged position to do so. We can take action to support those innocent citizens fleeing a war zone in search a future for their families. And I say in search of a future, what I mean is simply searching for a place of safety, so they can have a future. A place where the sound of missiles are whistling through the airs and the sky above, a place where there's no air raid sirens, and a place where no one's frightened to go shopping for their groceries. And that's the reality, that's the horror, that's the dread that faces Ukrainian citizens today. They're living in fear with the uncertainty of what tomorrow will bring. So as I said, we're in a privileged position and we can try and make tomorrow a safe place for some of those citizens. And I know they'll be welcomed in Midlothian. And therefore, Provost, I welcome this paper and I welcome the Scottish Government being a super sponsor. I know a lot of work's already been undertaken by our officers and has been ongoing for some weeks now. We need to make sure that we're ready with services such as interpreters, education, health and wellbeing support, digital devices and employment support. And Provost, one thing that struck me yesterday when I was thinking about this is the fact that in terms of employment support, there may be opportunities in interpretation services for those Ukrainian citizens who are bilingual. And I'll just leave that on the blackboard. Anyway, Provost, I'm sure others will want to contribute, and I'm happy to move the recommendations and pause there.
Thank you, Councillor Curran. And we have also Councillor Parry, then Councillor Russell. And if one of the councillors would like to second Councillor Curran's movement, that would help with the formalities of this. Councillor Parry.
Thanks, Provost. Yeah, I'm happy to second Councillor Curran and endorse what he had just said. Also like to put my record of thanks to everybody in the council teams who are working really hard to prepare for Ukrainians to arrive in Midlothian, and also those people in Midlothian who have put themselves forward to open the doors of their own homes to welcome Ukrainians here. And I understand that there has been applications made from Midlothian already, so that's great news. I have a couple of comments about this and a couple of questions as well. I guess the first is just to raise a few points of concern, really, particularly around the way that the UK government has set this scheme up and how it might be open to exploitation from people who might use it in terms of human trafficking or other points of exploitation. It seems like some parts of the scheme are quite ill thought out in terms of how the matching takes place, and I appreciate that councils will have less contact with the matching element of this. However, as I understand it, councils will have to do some of the checks on people who are opening their doors in Midlothian. And I guess my fear is that what might happen in terms of people who are using this scheme to exploit vulnerable people, particularly children. And my other concern is what happens when some of these schemes break down. So obviously councils will have to pick up the pieces of that, both operationally and financially as well. And I just had one other question, which is maybe more a finance question for Gary. I was quite interested in, there's been a few councils that have made small, but they have made some donations towards the Disasters Emergency Committee funding. And I did wonder whether, particularly thinking about the Provost budget, where we hold a small amount of money for civic operations that has probably been underspent over the last few years, if there is anything in that, could we use that to make a donation to the DEC fund? But it'd be good to get any reassurances in terms of some of the concerns that have been raised by many organisations, Scottish Refugee Council and those involved in human trafficking and exploitation, and also any clarity on any that civic funding would be helpful as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Parry. We've had a comment from Joan Trinette that the safeguarding rules, so this very important point that you're raising, these are still to be evolved, but I think all councillors are conscious that the majority of refugees will be women and children, therefore considerable care will have to be taken. As regards the Provost allowance, I think 2,000 a year, it certainly is underspent, but I'm advised by Alan Turpey that the basis on which it can be spent is extremely narrow. But if there were any way that it could be utilised, I would be happy to consider that. Then I think if that covers your points, Councillor Parry, I move on to Councillor Russell.
Thank you, Provost. Can I just say I have had an email from the Dalkeith Community Council saying the audio isn't working. So can Marco look into that for me, please? I have a question, mainly, I don't think I need to say any more because all the words have been already spoken about the tragedy that's happening. I have one question though, with regards to people welcoming some of the Ukrainians into their own families, but some are council tenants and may be in receipt of various other benefits, single person's benefit, that type of thing. And I'm looking for some sort of answer, guidance that our own tenants can see how they can help with the whole tragedy issue. Thank you.
An interesting question, whether we have any discretion in these matters under the rules. Perhaps Kevin Anderson could respond to that.
Yes, thank you, Provost. Yes, I can reassure Councillor Russell that certainly there is guidance which has subsequently come out in terms of not impacting on people's council tax reduction, or indeed any housing benefit or universal credit benefits that people are eligible for. And that's on the basis that any arrivals are going to be treated as temporary and not permanent members of a household. So that gives us a workaround in that respect. So there's no detriment there. That's in terms of our own tenancies and social sector, as well as private rented sector. But in terms of whether that creates other issues, and I think Councillor Parry's alluded to some of that, where there might be overcrowding or some other concerns there, clearly we can deal with those within the social sector. There are some concerns, again, we're still waiting on clarity, as Joan's referenced from other guidance, about our enforcement powers, for want of a better term, in terms of safeguarding checks and other checks on accommodation, which are not in our sector and our right and legal position in terms of gaining access. But those are areas that are still work in progress. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you.
The leader, Councillor Milligan.
Yeah, it's just to push a wee bit more on Kelly's point, because the point Kelly's making is probably one of the most important ones here, that there are a lot of vulnerable people here, and there are some deep flaws in the way this has been dealt with. And it's just, I know what Joan's saying in the chat there, but I think what we'll be looking for is an assurance for Joan that we'll have the staff to be able to deal with this, because it's quite candidly, we didn't have social workers just sitting around the corner waiting on a case coming, and it's just to find out how are we going to deal with that, where are we going to get the professionals to make sure that people going to houses are actually safe and that they're there. And I want to maybe push Kevin a wee bit on that. It's a good suggestion Stevie made about if you have Ukrainians coming over that can speak reasonable English, can we use them as interpreters? But the reality is what I'm looking for is are we working right across the board with the health service, with education, with everybody? Because quite candidly, there's not going to be enough interpreters through the whole of Great Britain that speak Ukrainian, speak English, that we can get. We'll all be chasing the same thing. If you've got Ukrainian children going to a school, how are you going to have the teachers to be able to teach them to speak English? Are we looking at devices? And I'm not akin to this, other people, we are a lot more up to date with this, but I'm told that, for example, on your phone, you can maybe speak in English and it comes out Ukrainian. Are we looking to make sure that there are devices available to the people coming in and to people through the health services, through all the services that these people will need, social workers and that will be able to make sure that there is clear communications, because I think that's critical to keeping people safe, to make sure that kids are educated, etc. And it's not just as easy as people are arriving here, we'll support them. There's a great cultural, great differences here and there, and I think there needs to be a lot of work done in that, because I didn't think there's the amount of Ukrainian speaking people here that you would find for other populations that have maybe moved here.
Thank you, Councillor Milligan. There are three officers hinted at there. If perhaps Joan Trinent could briefly comment, and then Kevin and Fiona on the interface with the education services.
Yeah, thank you, Provost. Just to offer reassurance, I mean, I was at Social Work Scotland on Friday, so we are still awaiting guidance in relation to safeguarding as to what our responsibility will be in relation to that, but be reassured. I mean, a team is being set up on Monday. We have a meeting set up in relation to education, housing, the voluntary third sector, Red Cross, etc., adult services, health, in order to take this forward. Lorraine Chapman is a single point of contact at the moment, as well as someone in housing. So we're bringing all that information together. There is a huge amount of information application, as everyone will know. Lots of emails are coming into our inbox, so Monday was the preferred date in order for us to, you know, gather that information and see what we need. We're aware that applications are already being made in school, and Fiona and I have discussed this morning. So again, we will be pausing that until Monday to make sure that we offer an equitable and proportionate response to these requests, because some schools are full. So we do have plans in the background, and we will offer that reassurance that we're working tirelessly in the background. We don't have surplus staff, as already mentioned, but you know, our effort is that anybody who enters Midlothian is needs to be safe, and that will be our #1 priority. So we'll need to rejig things, which we will do in relation to making sure that that happens. And we'll be learning from our colleagues as well. I mean, this isn't just Midlothian, so you know, most of us around this table sit on national meetings, so we will be learning from our colleagues across Scotland to make sure that we do this collaboratively where possible, and learning from any other incidents. But as Kevin said, we have done it before. It is a wee bit different because we don't know what the numbers are going to be, but just to offer that reassurance that we are on it and we're working tirelessly behind the scenes, and we will present the plan once we've had the meeting on Monday as to how we're going to take that forward. I hope that suffices. Thank you.
Thank you. And Kevin, I think Councillor Milligan would like a little more information as to how we're actually going to deliver across the various functions of the council the support that we want to have.
Yes, thanks, Provost. I think Joan's alluded to that in terms of the Care for People group primarily takes across the council as well as other multi-agency efforts. As she says, that scopes in health, education, housing, whole range, as well as the voluntary sector, because we've had this past experience with Afghans and Syrian refugees that people within the communities step up and step in as well. And certainly we do utilise those. So there are some Ukrainians in Midlothian, I know that because we've had presentations already. And some people come forward in terms of helping, in terms of that translation and interpretation. Now, we will use formal services for formal purposes, such as banking, tenancy agreements, that kind of thing. But equally, some things are at a lower level, which don't need to ensure that we've got a full-scale translation or interpretation happening for legal purposes. So we will make use of what community resource is also available, because again, as Joan's indicated, we have been inundated clearly since the conflict started, with everybody looking to assist as far as they possibly can in this. And again, from previous experience, we look at all the good practice forums because we do share that information about what people are experiencing, because there will be cultural differences, let alone language differences and expectations, because we've had that past experience also. So it's about pooling that knowledge and that resource too. So I don't anticipate that it's going to be easy, of course not. People have been displaced in the most horrendous circumstances, but that was the case with the Afghans and the Syrians as well. So we don't diminish that. We know the sort of support and care that's going to be required, and some of that won't transpire until they've been here for some period of time and settled to some extent too. And some of those issues and relationships and arrangements will break down. And again, that's where we step forward as the statutory services, because all of these arrivals will have a designation as a UK citizen, even if it's for a temporary period, so they have the same entitlements and eligibility as you and I, but nothing more, but nothing less. Thanks.
Thank you. Fiona Robson has put on the messaging that there will be e-learning facilities, so the sort of digital aspect of simulation has already been thought about. Fiona, would you want to comment a little bit more on the interface with education?
Yes, just again to say that Education Scotland have reached out to local authorities, and that we will be coordinating with them in relation to the national e-learning offer, which is already available to many of our learners. But the eSchool does have access to Ukrainian speaking teaching staff, and they're looking at translating some of the lessons that are on the national e-learning offer. And again, we would be able to provide that via the devices that we could provide for children and young people. So it is a coordinated effort with Education Scotland, but again, it's coming through the group that Joan mentioned earlier. So we have our school group manager, Annabelle Bates, will be our key lead from education, that will sit on the group that Joan is talking about. We will coordinate all the support so that we make sure it's successful. And I've also issued a statement out to head teachers, just again to provide them with advice that we will have a coordinated approach if they are approached by parents at the moment stating that they have families coming to stay with them, is again to direct them into the centre, so that we can make sure that it's the family are fully supported and that we understand the children's needs both from learning and a well-being perspective. So again, just making sure we're coordinated.
Thank you for that. Councillor Milligan.
Sorry, Provost, that's a legacy hand.
Councillor Hackett.
Thank you, Provost. It's been mentioned some of the groundswell of support from the community. I know a number of groups have been set up locally to support the efforts in Ukraine, whether that being to gather up supplies to send over to Ukraine or trying to coordinate a community response for people arriving. I'm just wondering what role, if any, the council would have in terms of signposting or providing like a one-stop shop, or to go a bit further, helping to coordinate some of the activities of these welcoming groups at the local community level. Thank you.
Kevin Anderson, you might be able to help, Kevin.
Thanks, Provost. Certainly in terms of the advice and guidance we're giving at the moment is directing people to the DEC, as has been mentioned, also to Scottish and UK government. There's in the paper, there's a range of other links, again, across the range of advice and support, which the public will be able to access from the public drive here as well, because there are Ukrainian-orientated community efforts, because there's an established community in Edinburgh and our neighbouring authority. So we're certainly directing people to those, because certainly the efforts I know in terms of distributing items is being discouraged. It's really a case of the call is out for cash to allow those humanitarian agents that are operating on the borders to be able to deliver what they do, and the Red Cross and others has been referenced when they arrive here ultimately as well, so they can be more effective in what people are actually needing rather than what we consider might be required. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Councillor McCall.
Thank you, Provost. It was really just to second Councillor Parry's motion to use your purse to, for want of a better, the Provost's purse, not you personally, obviously, to make a donation to whichever charity we feel would be best placed to fund.
The allowance is under the control of the Scottish Government's rules. I'll ask Mr. Turpie about it, as I previously said. Have we lost sound?
Chair, no. Yep, happy to come in, and I don't want to be the bearer of bad news, but on this occasion, the Local Governance Scotland Act remuneration regulations make it quite clear what the Provost allowance can be used for, and that would not extend as far as a charitable donation. The Council has powers under Section 83 of the Local Government Scotland Act to make charitable contributions within the UK, which is why the Disasters Emergency Committee has been used by other councils as the recipient of any charitable donations, because that falls within the terms of the Local Government Scotland Act. I suppose it's really a question of, does the council wish to make a donation, and if so, how does it intend to fund that donation? It's probably more of, we're looking at one specific part of the council finance, whereas we should perhaps be looking wider. Does the council wish to make a donation in the first place, and if so, does it wish to give? Where are we going to find those funds from? Now, I appreciate I'm probably stepping across from legislation into financial matters, which I claim sort of no expertise, Chair, but the council can make a donation to the Disasters Emergency Committee, and other councils in Scotland have done so. It's whether this council wishes to do so, and if so, how we're going to fund it.
Would it be best to proceed by having a paper on the options for councillors brought to the first council in May? Councillor Johnson, I think nodding your head that you don't want to go that way.
No, I think we should. I know we've agreed the budget, etc. So this is probably out with the budget remit, but we could suspend standing orders in order to make a decision to the DEC. And I would suggest that we try to be as generous as possible. and that would help them in their wider role in secure and safe passage for people too. So I propose that we suspend standing orders and make a donation of maybe around £20,000.
Mr. Turpey, can we proceed on that basis? Is there a seconder for that? First of all, we'd have to suspend standing orders.
I think, yes, Chair. I mean, the obvious thing is you will have to suspend standing orders, and it may be worth hearing from the Section 95 officers to where the funds could be come from, because it's when the budget is set, then obviously there's every penny is spoken for. So if we are going to make if the council does want to make the donation to the DEC, then it has to come from somewhere. And it may be whether that's taking money out of various accounts and putting them in a temporary account to allow that money then to move across. But I'd say we're getting into financial and accounting matters, which I would defer in all occasions to Mr. Fairley.
Call for Mr. Fairley.
Yes, thanks, Provost, and thanks to Mr. Turpey. I suppose, first of all, to be clear that for the donation to be lawful, it would need to be made to a charity to fund their activities in the UK. Secondly, in terms of there is no budget if council were making a commitment to make the donation today, we would account for that in the current financial year 21-22, despite it only having a couple of days to go. There is no budget provision to which that could be drawn from, and therefore any donation would be a direct impact on the council's projected reserve position. So it would need to come from council reserves as a supplementary estimate. So just to be clear on the legal position in terms of making the donation to fund UK activities, so any contribution would need to be made with that caveat to keep it within the powers that you have. And in terms of any budget position, you would need to agree to fund that from the general reserve. Thank you.
Thank you. My interpretation is it will be possible to do it in those terms and within the budget for the current year, so we're not disturbing the budget we passed at the last council meeting. Councillor Johnston.
Thank you very much. I would be agreeable to that, and I hope everybody across the chamber could agree to do this. I feel really quite passionate about helping these people, and if it has to be, the money has to be spent in the UK to help them, that's fine.
Okay. There being no other comment from Alan Turpey. Councillor Cassidy?
Yes, I just was going to second Councillor Johnston's motion.
Okay, so first of all, we have to suspend standing orders, so if the Democratic Services could have a roll call on that.
Provost, so I'll just do the roll call just now. So if you're in favour of suspending the standing orders, just acknowledge that by yes. So Councillor Alexander?
Yes.
Cassidy?
Yes.
Councillor Curran?
Yes.
Councillor Hackett?
Yes.
Councillor Hardy?
Yes.
Emery?
Yes.
Councillor Johnston?
Yes.
Councillor Leigh Douglas?
Yes.
Councillor McCall?
Yes.
Councillor Mackenzie?
Yes.
Councillor Milligan?
Yes.
Councillor Muirhead?
Yes.
Councillor Monroe?
Yes.
Councillor Parry?
Aye.
Councillor Russell?
Yes.
Provost?
Yes.
Councillor Wallace?
Yes.
Councillor Winchester?
Yes.
That's a unanimous vote to suspend the standing orders, Provost.
Thank you all for that clarity. We then have the substantive motion, and to get this absolutely right, to make sure this is a legal donation, we need to do this properly. So I think, again, we need to have a roll call. All those in favour of Councillor Johnston's motion as seconded by Councillor Cassidy?
If you just would indicate with a yes, that would be helpful. Councillor Alexander?
Yes.
Councillor Cassidy?
Yes.
Councillor Curran,
Yes.
Councillor Hackett,
Yes.
Councillor Hardy,
Yes.
Councillor Emery,
Yes.
Councillor Johnston,
Yes.
Councillor Leigh Douglas,
Yes.
Councillor McCall,
Yes.
Councillor Mackenzie,
Yes.
Councillor Milligan,
Yeah.
Councillor Muirhead,
Yes.
Councillor Monroe,
Yes.
Councillor Parry,
Aye.
Councillor Russell,
Yes.
Provost,
Yes.
Councillor Wallace,
Yes.
Councillor Winchester.
Yes.
Again, that's a unanimous, Provost.
Thank you very much.
For that. I think it's very important that we make these symbolic and real moves towards helping the terrible situation in Ukraine. And I thank the councillors for their contribution to the discussion as to how we're going to practically interface with the problems we have. We now move on to item 8.3, multi-agency public protection arrangements, or as known as MAPA. Could I ask Nick Claytor to talk to this paper, 8.3 on page 45?
Thank you, Provost. So this report is a report covering the MAPA annual report for 2020 to 21, which was published in December of last year. And by way of recap, MAPA arrangements were established in 2007. The purpose of MAPA is to coordinate a response from a range of agencies in relation to the management of registered sex offenders, or RSOs, as well as restricted patients who are people who have committed an offence but do not go to prison on account of their mental disorder. It was extended, MAPA was extended to include certain violent offenders in 2016, and the MAPA annual report cited covers Lothian and Borders, effectively the old police division of Lothian and Borders. There's been no significant change from the previous year contained in this report, so 899 people are supervised over the period of the report that's covered. The vast majority of those were at level 1, which is the lowest level. There are 3 levels, and there was only 1 across Lothian at level 3. In Midlothian, we had 54 people, 52 of which were at level 1, 2 of which were at level 2, and none at the highest level, level 3. That accounts for 6% of the total, with the population of Midlothian across Lothian and Borders being higher than that. Of the 54, 10 in total were charged during that time with other offences, 2 of which were sexual offences. Approximately at any one time across each quarter, between 20 and 22 people are supervised by our Justice Social Work team. The rest are generally managed by Police Scotland, and again, the majority of those are at the lower level. Those at level 2, the 2 that are at level 2 are managed on a multi-agency basis, and the levels pertain to the level of risk that people are felt to present with, not the index offences themselves. It should be noted that in terms of reconviction statistics, sexual offences are the crime type associated with the lowest reconviction rate. We do continue to undertake multi-agency training on this issue, particularly within our justice team, but on a multi-agency basis as well. Oversight is provided locally via an offender management group, which feeds up into our Public Protection Committee, which is an East and Mid Lothian Public Protection Committee, and governance of that is provided by our CSOG, or Critical Services Oversight Group, and Council is asked to note the report.
Note the report in this very difficult and sensitive area. Are there comments from the floor? There being none, I take it that we have assented to that. As a matter of good housekeeping, just moving back to the Ukraine paper, we were actually asked to make another decision, which was to do with delegation of authority. Could I know of any councillor who objects to the proposals in the replacement 8.2 paper regarding devolution of authority to officials to act in these matters? There being none, we take that as agreed, and we can move on. And thank Nick Claytor very much for his very clear description of the arrangements that the council has in place as regards MAPA. And I was interested in the statistics there as to the scale of the problem. Thank you again. 8.4, local heat and energy efficiency strategy. Kevin Anderson.
Thank you, Provost. This report recommends the development of an energy efficiency delivery plan for the Council's housing stock as a core plan in our statutory landlord responsibilities to support a local heat and energy efficiency strategy, and aligns to the local housing strategy previously agreed at Council last year. The Energy and Efficiency Standard for Social Housing, otherwise known as EISH in the jargon, is a follow-up to the original EISH 1 project, which was devised to help remove poor energy efficiency contributing to fuel poverty. That's where there was the introduction of energy performance certificates that members may be familiar with, and also our stock compliance in delivery of those, which is listed in 3.23 in the paper. EISH 2, as this is now defined, will progress to reduction in energy consumption, fuel poverty, and the emission of greenhouse gases. This report scopes the scale of the challenge to meet the policy and the legislative requirements, and proposes governance and resource for us to develop the best practical solutions for maximum impact, and to explore how we will meet and potentially exceed net zero carbon across our housing stock. While the rent affordability is also taken into account because the initial indicative cost is comparable to our peer group authorities, albeit it's significant, and Scottish Government support is being pursued through professional bodies and COSLA. Provost Council is recommended to note and agree respectively the actions in section 1 of the report, understanding that a further report will come to Council in due course. Thank you.
Kevin, so the bottom line is £70,000 cost for further report on this. There's also this eye-watering number of 114.76 million to 2032, and you talk about that implying rents will have to rise. Do these numbers actually gel? Because a 2.3% increase in our rent roll will have to run for many years to raise anything like this sort of number?
It would indeed. You're right. There's the forward funding element there. As I say, but we're not unique there. All other 31 local authorities are making the same approach to Scottish Government, because we're talking values of around 3 billion, to my recollection, in totality across the social rented sector to meet the additional burden that each two will provide to us. So certainly we will, if we continue to do our planned maintenance work and investment in the existing stock, development of new stock, and this in addition to that, then yes, we do require a rate increase of that magnitude. And of course that will persist on a phased basis because clearly it will take time in which to develop and deliver, which was the whole purpose of this scoping exercise, the feasibility of delivery, because there'll be a range of different actions that will be required across the range of the stock types and mix, which are different across the county as well. Thanks.
As you know, there will be decanting issues as well. It's always a difficult subject. Councillor Emery, then Councillor Curran.
Thank you, Provost. I just wanted to come in on that very point I think you started the discussion and debate on, and I don't think we can let today's meeting go by without looking at the estimated cost that's in there, which will only go northwards. I think we all know that that's going to happen, and you alluded to the decanting thing. And what I'm really worried about is that we move from trying to eradicate fuel poverty, which I'm sure 18 members around this council chamber will agree with, and that's our #1 agenda. And I'm sure the government felt that they had to come up with a strategy. The difficulty, I think, for all of us in local authorities, in local government, is that if the money doesn't follow the strategy, then it actually falls, the burden falls on our tenants. And what I'm really concerned about is that we will move from fuel poverty to eradicate that, and we will then have rent poverty, because we will actually have bills going up for our tenancies year on year. Now, Provost, that doesn't even start to look at the house building programme, which we were all signed up to, because clearly that has been tenant-led, and that has been something that we have had great support from our tenants from. But if you combine both, then it is a perfect storm. And I just think that we should, along with the other 31 authorities, as Kevin alluded to, we've got to continue to make representation, not only to Scottish Government, but to UK Government as well, because it's a common agenda. If we are going to get to a zero base, carbon base, in the timescales that we're trying to do, whether it be 2030, 35 or 40, then we really need to put money into this. You cannot have a strategy. You have got to back it up with money, and therefore, Provost, I just wanted to highlight that today because I feel very, very passionate about getting to zero carbon, but I also feel very passionate about not burdening our very tenants that have been burdened up till now. And we want to get people out of fuel poverty, and the only way to do that is to get it funded adequately and properly. And I'm very, very frightened that 114 million, as I said already at the start, will continue to go up and up and up, and it will fall on these very tenants that we're trying to get out of poverty. Thanks very much, Provost.
Indeed, certainly that 114 million is not in our housing reserves at the moment, and I just wonder 2.3% is correctly modelled, but no doubt the paper that we're going to have commissioned will look into that in greater detail. Councillor Curran.
Thanks, Provost. As Russell and yourself alluded to, we're all committed to achieving our climate change targets, and that's evidenced by our recent approval of the local housing strategy and the housing investment plan. But there are aspects that really concern me of this paper, none more so than the cost that yourself and Councillor Imrie's outlined, and the impact that will have on our ability to build council homes in the future. The cost detailed in the paper is 114 million, which equates to a 2.3% rise annually. But as Russell alluded to, we recently agreed a 1.1% rent increase for future years to support house building programmes. So, I mean, added together, that's 3.4% annually in future years. And, I don't think it's acceptable that we push tenants into rent poverty. We can't alleviate fuel poverty by pushing people into rent poverty. Provost, one of the points is, in 2026, we could be faced with having void houses which we're unable to let because we can't meet these H2 standards for a number of reasons. For that reason, I'd like to ask for an early report back to Council on the homes that will not meet this standard. And for some of our houses, it may be cheaper to rebuild them rather than renovate them to achieve a better energy efficient home. And just on that note, Provost, I'll note the report, and I think we need to move the approval as well. So I'll move the recommendations.
Thank you for that, and you're quite right that your retrofitting can be extremely expensive. So that being the case, we have Councillor Wallace. Joe.
Provost, yeah, thanks, Provost. It's obviously horrible to talk about the poverty that people are getting plunged into, but how can we in Scotland eradicate poverty when the poverty is caused by Westminster's policies? 600 million gets spent by the Scottish Government on trying to mitigate against Tory policies.
Joe, I'm afraid you're on mute apparently. This was not due to the action of the Provost, I hasten to add.
Here, Joe.
So did they hear me?
Please continue.
Well, in Scotland, how can we eradicate poverty? But we're all against people getting plunged into poverty. But poverty is caused by Westminster's policies. The Scottish Government spends £600 million a year trying to mitigate against Tory policies. So no point is sitting here greeting about what's going to happen when we knew full well, we were told in 2014, everything was going to be far better together.
Thank you, Joe. I don't think I'll get into discussion of the 41 billion coming up through the Barnett formula at the moment. Are there any other contributions? Councillor Mackenzie.
Thank you, Provost. It's a question for Kevin. Thanks for bringing this paper forward, Kevin. We talk in terms of an additional rent increase of 2.3%. Is there any way that this could be paid for by using the use of a levy, for instance, which at least would give people rather than an incremental change which will be there forever. It will give them a fixed levy whereby we effectively pay for the improvements over, say, 15, 20 years. So it would give a very low amount. Sure, the council would pay the burden over time, but it would give people a predictable amount, which is an additional non-rent payment, if you see what I'm saying.
I think that's a question to the financial modelling, which I rather think what Councillor Imrie and I have covered already. Would it be okay, Councillor Mackenzie, if we wait to see what this paper says in terms of the spreading over time? And I agree with you. When you're making these fundamental long-term improvements to the house, you should spread the cost. We've all heard this from me before, for as far as you possibly can, given the longevity of the asset benefit. If I just leave that on the blackboard, shall we move on?
Yeah, that's fine. Thanks, Peter.
Thank you. Councillor Milligan.
Yeah, Provost, I'd just like to press Kevin a wee bit on the point Russell made. Unless I read the paper on this wrongly, I had thought the Scottish Government had set in this direction that rent poverty couldn't have replaced fuel poverty. So have I read that wrong? Because if I've read it right, then actually you can't put the rent up to buy this bill.
Thanks, Provost. So it was the formula in terms of the rent is to equate clearly the investment that's going to be required there. And I think that's really picking up the points that Councillor Imrie, the Provost, and indeed Councillor Mackenzie are making. And that once we have done, because the ask today is that we go and carry out this feasibility, clearly about delivery of the programme. Part of that then needs to be exactly the modelling about how we're going to do it and how we're going to pay for that. Now, some choices may need to be made relative to your house building programme, as has been indicated in your own debate there. Also then looking at other funding or financial models in the event that the ask that's being done collectively to Scottish Government doesn't transpire in any additional resource. We're not there yet is the answer to your respective questions. We need to do this work piece and then bring that back. But it's not just saying here's the problem, it's about potential solutions in that as well. But clearly rent affordability, which is Councillor Milligan's point, is uppermost in our mind, because clearly there's a watching brief by the regulator in that respect as well, to make sure that we don't make rents unaffordable relative to household incomes.
Thank you. That was a useful starter on a debate that I'm sure is going to go on for many years to come. And you know, sometimes the best is the enemy of the good, and we obviously need to progress here. But the balance of keeping our rents competitive and thinking about the social conditions that are involved is an important thing to get right. So I think we are commending the report, noting the challenge, and authorising the budget of £70,000. I take it that £70,000 does not fall foul of the Section 95 officers' rules. Silence implied this assent.
No, it doesn't, Provost. It's coming from the HRA, clearly to affect investment in the assets of the HRA. Thanks.
So it's within our existing provisions. Okay, thank you very much. We move on to 8.5. Can I welcome Morag Barrow to talk about domiciliary care?
Thank you, Provost. So this report is a historical report that dates from an inspection carried out by the Care Inspectorate to our Care at Home service in August 2021. This report would have previously gone to Cabinet and PRS, Public Review and Performance Review and Scrutiny, but due to timings and changes in dates, it's come to Council for noting. The Care Inspectorate, as part of routine unannounced inspections, inspected our Care at Home service on 3 areas, which are noted in the paper. How well do we support people's well-being? How good is our leadership? And how good is our care and support during the COVID pandemic? Of which we received 3, 3 and 4 respectively in terms of grading. However, I'm delighted to announce today that an inspection earlier on this month, our grades have increased to 4s across the piece, which I think again is a testament to the commitment and the focus of our teams in terms of raising grades, but also during a pandemic. But happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. It's a very encouraging report, and obviously it's a civilised thing to have folks stay at home for as long as they can with the support of domiciliary care. Councillor Milligan.
Yeah, Provost, just to reiterate what we said the last time, I'd like to thank the Chief Executive for passing on our messages. Thanks to all the staff. But to come on the 19th of August, coming out of the middle of a pandemic where we're in and out, where you're talking about staff either isolating because they've got COVID or isolating because they've been in contact with somebody with COVID, struggling for staff across the place, having to move in staff for either leisure or other services to bolster this up. To still get 2 3s and a 4 in August last year at that stage, I think was outstanding, given the problems that they had. For that then, on the 4th of March this year, for staff to get up to 4 goods, Morag, I think is absolutely shows that we've got an outstanding staffing base there. And again, just pass on our thanks to everybody for all their hard work, and congratulations in getting this kind of result. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Johnston. Kath.
Hi, thank you. It's really good to see that there's been an improvement, but I still don't think it's good enough, even in a pandemic. I mean, I think if it was my relative and I'm going to put them into a care home, I'm wanting something just good. I'm wanting my mammy to be looked after so well that I'm fair chuff telling everybody what's going on, and I don't feel I could actually do that here. I still think there's lots room for improvement, and I look forward to seeing that, even though I won't be a councillor in the forthcoming after the elections.
Yeah, the areas like the wishes and choices should be recorded, but I think more like you were indicating we're progressing on that to make it as humanised and personalised as we possibly can.
Yeah, if I could just come back to Councillor Johnson, this report is about care at home, not in a care home. But you're absolutely right, Councillor Johnson, we have a quality improvement approach. So despite us having the highest grades that we've had for a significant amount of years on this, we're not sitting resting back on our laurels with this. We still want to improve further, but you'll appreciate, as Councillor Milligan said, the challenges we've had recently. That being said, as we move to a different stage in the pandemic, I think again there will be additional focus on some of the areas of quality improvement that we've wanted to do for a while. So I take on board your comments, and we will, as you always know, have a quality assurance and improvement approach in the Health and Social Care Partnership.
Thank you for that. And the report is noted, and can I also thank you, Morag, and your staff for the work in this really important area. We move on to your report on New Byres Village Care Home, which I think is 8.6 at page 197. Morag.
Thank you, Provost. So again, this is a similar report. It's part of routine unannounced inspection reports. We were inspected at New Byres Care Home on the 22nd November 2021. We were inspected again over 2 areas. How well do we support people's well-being, and how good is our care and support during a pandemic? These are broken down into 5 separate areas. So under well-being, people experience compassion, dignity and support. We received a 4. People get the most out of life, we received a 4. And people's health benefits from care and support, we received a 3 for. Care during COVID, again for infection control, we received a 4, and for workforce, primarily staffing, we received a 4. So I guess in relation to previous comments around quality improvement, yes, we're disappointed to have a 3 in that one area out of the 5. That related to medication and some skincare concerns, and particularly around documentation. So again, the care home have got a specific action plan in place, and we will come back with improvement at that in the next report. Happy to take any questions again.
Thank you for that, and it's very encouraging considering the problems we had at New Byres some 5 years ago, but they seem to have been well surmounted, even though there's a little bit more still to go for. Councillor Milligan.
Yeah, again, Provost, just to reiterate what I said in the last report, I'm given where we're in that, and you look at some of the comments that people have made here about how well they feel that this place is run. I think this is excellent. I kind of did have a wee wry smile when I thought to myself, the care inspector are looking to see how well we support people during the COVID-19 pandemic. And I've got to say, I think I was the care inspectorate during the COVID pandemic with an A, as absent actually most of the time. So just a wee wry smile there that they're actually measuring people as to how well they reacted in the pandemic, and yet I think I heard right across the board for everybody that was involved, Ken, where the heck were the care inspectorate at the start of this?
You better let that one go to the blackboard, Councillor Milligan, but thank you for the comment all the same. Could we have Councillor Johnston?
Thanks again. Just the same, again, it was disappointing to read it was adequate. I dare say it was difficult for everybody during the pandemic, because we've never been in a pandemic before, so it was difficult to know what was the right thing to do when the advice was always changing. So I think that having a 4 is a fairly good mark, but I look forward to seeing a far more improved care inspectorate report the next time, because I will keep an eye on it even if I'm not here.
Thank you for that. And Councillor Hackett.
Thank you, Provost. Just noting the 4 rating on infection control, Morag, I'm just wondering if there was something different that New Buyers Care Home was doing to others. I know that certain other homes had major problems with their infection control. I'm just wondering if that good practice is being spread out to other homes. Thank you.
That's infections other than the COVID issues, or perhaps including?
Yeah, so we had a very good comment around our cleanliness and infection control for our recent High Bank report as well, Councillor Hackett. I think, again, probably the benefit of integration is health and care working together. So what has maybe been more traditionally seen as health focus in terms of infection control and so on has probably kind of rolled over naturally. We have got our care home manager just now has a nursing background as well. So again, probably with some of the learning we've had around care homes nationally around the pandemic, there's been an additional focus on this. So I don't have any kind of specific things to say we've done differently other than the fact that the whole care home team have really put a focus to make sure that everything that we control to keep our residents safe is in place, and particularly infection control.
Thank you. Again, we note and commend the report and look forward to further progress, but we're certainly a much better place than we used to be with this major asset that we have for the support of the older age group in Midlothian. Thank you again. I take it, Councillor Milligan, that's a legacy hand?
Yeah, Provost, sorry.
No problem. We move on, and Kevin Anderson's back on stage for the Future Housing Land Supply Paper 8.6, I think it is 8.7, at page 215.
Thank you, Provost. And this report follows a request at Council on the Affordable Housing Land Supply. Provost, I want to highlight a correction on Table 1, page 216 of members' papers, as that table was extracted from the Strategic Housing Investment Plan, the SHIP, without it actually being updated. So the site start dates do not reflect the current status. The correction, just to point those out on the table, is on line 4. It highlights Bonnyrigg High Street, the complex care, with an estimated actual start date of May 22. That's actually on site, so it starts in March 22. So there's a typo there. And on the 10th line, where the reference is Mayfield East Houses Road, that's the former Newbattle High School site, the first phase of that development. And that indicates a September 22, when in fact, again, we are on site. So that's a March 22 position. So my apologies for the error there, but just to highlight that correction. In turn, the report sets out the existing land supply and development programme aligned to that as approved in the SHIP, approved by Council last year. The future supply prospects are more limited as we utilise land held in on the HRA or indeed repurposed from the general fund, as in previous years, on brownfield sites. Section 3 of this paper outlines the activities to identify and prioritise potential sites against the needs and demands methodology detailed there. Also accounts for pipeline proposals and the collaboration through the City Deal housing workstream, because that will assist us in the delivery of future sites and maximising public sector land supply. But land purchase will indeed be required for future developments at some stage, and add then in turn to unit costs for delivery. Provost Council is recommended to note this paper, and in the update from these activities, which shall be reported back to Council in the next SHIP later on in the year. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Curran.
Thanks, Provost. Just and I see the paper for no time, but just a comment really. I think it's critical through delivery of the local plan that the land supply from private developers, i.e. the 25% affordable homes, is allocated to councils for rented homes. On that note, Provost, I'm just happy to know the report.
So the message here is we will have to acquire land. A rule of thumb, housing very often that land is a fifth of the total final value of the house. So I think currently a council house for rent's about 250,000, Kevin, and so this is going to incline to push this up quite apart from all the sort of passive house considerations that we've discussed earlier. Would that be right?
That's a good summation, Provost, yes.
Councillor Johnson.
Thank you very much. I'm sure this is an episode of double counting and just looking for confirmation of it. But on page 219, it says total waiting list applications. I've counted that up and it's nearly 21,000 people waiting on a house. I'm sure that is absolutely wrong, and there's not 21 people on the waiting list because some people will have more than one choice of village or town to live in. I'm just looking for that because if we're proposing only to build £770 houses, the 21,000 people on the list have got to be really disappointed.
Yeah, I think this might be apples and oranges. My understanding is the waiting list is of the order of about 4,000. Kevin Anderson, would you like to comment on the presentation of the early pressure analysis?
Yes, absolutely. You're right, Provost, in terms of the actual applications, and Councillor Johnson in turn is right because those numbers reflect the range of people's area choices because they're not restricted to any one area but to multiple. So that is the position as reflected. You're correct. You're both correct.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Okay, so this is for noting. I take it has been noted, and we move on to 8.8, review of garage lockup and garage sites. Kevin.
Thank you again, Provost. So this report was also previously requested at Council and outlines the profile, occupancy and rate of demand in the garage lockups and garage site estate. Changes have been made in letting terms and the purpose and use of these over the years, but these facilities have not resulted in any increased demand to any significant extent. And in conjunction with the preceding paper on land supply, the report that you have before you recommends that we review the sites which can be repurposed for house building, as we've done in recent times in Bilston and indeed Path Head, or for economic activity, such as workshops or community use, or indeed demolition for additional car parking in particular estates, where each of these in turn are relevant and appropriate. So Provost, again, it's recommended to note this report and a follow paper from that exercise will be combined with the land supply and the SHIP piece to come forward in due course. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Obviously, the world's moved on from the days when it was vital to have a garage, or else your car would rust away in a few years. But there are, of course, multiple opportunities and purposes that can be involved here. Can I take it that the community councils will be fully consulted about the alternative uses that might be involved? Kevin.
Yes, we're due to go out on rent strategy consultation, so there'll be a wider stakeholder group who will have input into that process, Provost, yes. And clearly this will be one of the factors that impacts on the rent consultation and the local housing strategy thereafter.
Thank you for that. Councillor Curran.
Thanks, Provost, and I agree absolutely. We should be looking to repurpose low demand sites where possible to enhance our housing stock, like we've done in Path Head and Bilston. I do think we could get a wee bit better at marketing these sites and lockups, and just consideration for future uses. So I'm thinking out loud here. So business use for storage for small businesses. We could let void lockups free of charge for local community volunteer groups such as Gala Days. At least that way, if they're occupied, there's some sort of security there. And where we're looking to repurpose as a community space, we should also consider allotments. And I support the proposal detailed in 4.1, Provost.
Thank you for that. It's noting for information, but I get your support all the same. Councillor Johnson.
Thank you very much. I do support everything it said, but I was really quite disappointed. This report is a long time in coming, I think maybe about 5 years, and I was looking forward to solutions and proposals, and I was getting quite excited about it, only to find that we're going to have another report. So I just think it's a bit of procrastination, and how long do we have to take to make decisions on this council? We're going forever about simple things.
I suspect that sentiment is quite well developed over the years, Councillor Johnson, and I sympathise with it. It's a very open-ended paper, just saying we'll look at the options, but there have been issues about the garages for years now, so I'm kind of with you on that. Councillor Curran, possibly legacy hand. Councillor Hackett, who might want to talk about Mayfield.
Yeah, thanks, Provost. I am going to be parochial, if that's okay. It was pleasing to see Mayfield named specifically in the report. Welcome the 10 new houses that are being delivered in Pathhead. But yeah, quick action. I find myself in the strange position of agreeing with Kath. It's taken to the last council meeting, but here we are. It'd be good to see progress on this as quickly as possible. Thank you.
And Councillor Cassidy.
Thank you, Provost. Yeah, I'd like to echo Councillor Curran's words. I think this is a positive step forward. You know, as Councillor Johnson said, I asked this question 5 years ago. It's one of the first questions I asked when I got into council, and we're eventually at the end of our tenure getting this report. I hope that the future progress of this doesn't drag its heels as much as getting a positive outcome and the reuse of these pieces of ground, which to me look to be a liability at the moment. So it would get something off our hands. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And Councillor Mackenzie.
Thank you. I've got a quick question for you, Kevin, but before I do that, I'll echo what all the other councillors have said. We know for a fact that there is widespread support in the community for this land to be turned into something productive. And I, for the life of me, cannot understand why it takes 5 years to get to the final point of saying we need to look into it a bit more. Yeah, we've got land, we've got a need for housing, or as Councillor Curran said, small business support. So hope to see a lot of faster action in the future. But the question, Kevin, was where this land, which is currently under concrete, basically as a garage or what have you, where it backs up into parkland, Kevin, is there any restrictions in terms of the boundary area, and that is obviously allocated as green land or places for people?
Is there a question of extending the site into Greenland or extending the Greenland into the site?
Yeah, well, if need be, so if, for instance, we needed to take, let's say, 10 feet of it to use for something else, which was necessary for housing, are we able to show that degree of flexibility?
Yes, Councillor Mackenzie.
Kevin, yes.
Yeah, yes is a short answer, Councillor Mackenzie. As say in the paper, we're not precious or restricted in terms of what the alternative uses would be. So clearly that would add in terms of recreation or amenity space. So yes, that would fall into that consideration. It's all council land ultimately then at the end of the day. So we wouldn't see that as being a barrier to progress. And indeed, because of the housing developments that in fact we actually have delivered over the last 5 years in Pathhead and Bilston, it's more of that is really what we're proposing to do, where there's the opportunity to do so. Thanks.
Yeah.
Good. So could be marriage value between two sites producing what would otherwise not viable housing development might become so because there's a bigger footprint. Thank you very much for that. Okay, Stuart, your hand's still up, but I think the matter is now noted. And we now move to fire and smoke alarms in Midlothian, 8.9 on page 237. Kevin.
Thanks, Provost. So this report is an update and follows the legislative change on the fire and smoke alarm provision in February, which was reported to Council at that time in respect of all occupied homes in Scotland. It was reported to members at the February Council that there is not an established care and repair scheme in Midlothian, although the feasibility of that being re-established is being explored through the IGB and indeed the local housing strategy agreed by members. Meantime, however, a successful bid was made to Care and Repair Scotland for additional funding, which was specifically allocated for local authorities with no current care and repair scheme. So the award which has been received has been used to purchase interlinked alarms which have been in short supply, and these will be made available to eligible households in terms of the eligibility criteria in the paper, whilst we have available stock to do so. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, the headline, this is obviously an unattractive and expensive thing to do, but important to do in terms of human safety. But we're talking about £300 if the individual has to pay. But I think what's perhaps misleading to the public about this paper is once you apply the age, disability and council house band criteria, on my understanding, there may be only about 64 people in Midlothian will get this. Is that correct?
Well, we from the order, yes, there'll be 125 of the interlinked alarm pieces of kit and 64 of the heat detectors. So in totality, there'll be 64 households will be our limit in making this provision. In addition, of course, Scottish Fire and Rescue have also been making provision across Midlothian to high-risk households too, just to reference that point. Thanks.
But for the rest of us, this will have to be found, hopefully, from reputable tradesmen. And is there an issue here about fly-by-night, door-to-door folk charging ridiculous amounts? Have trading standards got a handle on this? Kevin?
Yes, indeed, that's been part of the advice. I mean, prior to the legislation taking effect, Provost, clearly we were getting that messaging out. The trading standards aspect, as you indicate, as well as the actual legislative requirement and the referrals to, again, through Care and Repair Scotland, where they are directing people to trusted traders to use the jargon again. Thanks.
Thank you for that. Councillor Curran.
Thanks, Provost. Just to thank Kevin for his efforts in obtaining the grant for Care and Repair Scotland. A couple of questions, Kevin. Routes to the application process and the actual process, when will that begin and when will that be available for applicants? And the second question is, well, I take it this will feed into the feasibility on a future care and repair service in Midlothian?
Yes, thanks. So we appreciate the assistance we've had with Care and Repair Scotland here, and indeed they have agreed to assist us in the development and the feasibility of any future schemes. I just want to acknowledge that up front. In terms of the routes into your question, Care and Repair Scotland have been receiving inquiries and referrals, which we're accepting from them, and there will be a direct application opportunity that we will get on the council's website and publicised through comms once that's available. So yes, it will be a one-pager application across the criteria, which indeed the Provost outlined in the earlier debate. Thanks.
Thank you for that. Again, a report for noting, and there being no other contributions, we move to the late paper 810, intake figures and limits for primary and secondary school session. This was separately issued. Could I ask Fiona to comment on this report for noting and perhaps explain why it was a bit late in the day?
Yep, thank you very much, Provost, and thank you very much for accepting the late paper. We deferred the preparation of this paper until after the deadline for placing requests, and that's enabled us to provide a more accurate landscape of the estimated intake for August 2022. And just to reiterate that whilst the report states that it is for noting, there is one aspect that does require a decision, and that's with regard to the proposed intake limits that are detailed within the report. So the report does provide Council with an update on the enrolment of pupils and intake for session 22-23 and the need to apply intake limits to safeguard places and manage the out with catchment placing requests and taking account of the current legislation. Primary school numbers have grown by approximately 2% each year over the last 3 years within Midlothian, whilst nationally they've seen a 1% decrease. Our secondary population has been increasing each year with a 4% increase last year, and again nationally the increase was around 2%. Primary 1 and S1 enrolment for 22-23 is well underway, with over 1,000 primary pupils registered, but this is a 2% decrease on 2021. And we've got over 1,000 secondary pupils, but that's a 4% increase on the 2021 figure. We have 166 requests for a deferral to entering school at P1, and that's a 4% increase, but I should reiterate that 66% of these deferrals are automatic due to age, and others for a variety of reasons, but also might reflect the ongoing disruption that we're seeing within education as a result of the pandemic this year. So information on the P1 intake for August 2022 and the limits at each individual school level is set out in tables 1 and 2. And within the secondary sector, we continue to monitor our S1 intake within the Dalkeith campus and Lastwade High School. 35% of our pupils in Lonehead area are opting to attend BSLAC next year. And further detail on the S1 intake and capping is set out in table 3, and I'm happy to take any questions on the content of the report. Thank you.
My understanding, this is before us because we need to set the process running, which will then lead to allocations and give time for parents to appeal if they want.
Correct. Yes.
Thank you for that. And as you say, we have to approve the intake limits formally as well as noting. Councillor Muirhead.
Thanks, Provost. I just, obviously, as Fiona's outlined, the capacity in a number of your schools is particularly tight, and it is really important that we, that we make sure that there is sufficient capacity for catchment area children in these houses, in these schools. Sorry. I'd like to thank Fiona and her team for the hard work that goes into making sure that we've got that capacity. It's not an easy thing to manage. We are growing at a really rapid rate in Midlothian, which puts these pressures on. And I suppose at the end of the day, there's a balance there, because we know that at some point, not easy to determine exactly when, but at some point in the future, the numbers of children attending our schools is going to go back down the way again. So there is a balancing act here to make sure that we didn't overextend ourselves in terms of the school estate. So it's not an easy job, as I say, and thanks to Fiona and her team. And I'm happy to move the part of the recommendations that we that we go ahead with these figures that are here and keep the spaces for the catchment area pupils.
Thank you, Councillor Muirhead. And Councillor Parry.
Thanks, Provost. Yeah, I mean, I guess just a kind of general point on my own area, Midlothian West, where we've got schools that are absolutely bursting at the seams, but we've just closed two. Just seems quite bizarre. But my question was more in terms of the Beeslack replacement school, which my understanding now is that the timetable has slipped significantly because the heads of terms or whatever are still being finalised. So it'd be good to get an update on that, Fiona. It's been, I'm appalled basically that parents still don't know where the new replacement school is going to be. I think that is really affecting parental choice at the moment. The lack of clarity and communication for the council on this issue has been really, really disappointing, and parents are really frustrated and really frustrated now that we're now going at local government elections under Purda, where now even if you wanted to make the announcement around that, it can't be done. So I'm really disappointed about that. Another point that I wanted to make was I did notice that there had been some literature circulating around Midlothian from other councillors about where the location of the school is, and I just wanted to put on record my disappointment at that, because I've sat at full council meetings time and time again asking for this information to go out to parents and carers. So I'm really, really disappointed about that. But I would like to know, Fiona, given that I've been told by you and Alan Turpey and the Chief Executive and others that I couldn't give out that level of information, is that level of information now being out there in the public sphere in any way going to threaten the heads of terms being finalised, or is in any way going to pose any threat to the timetable or the plan for the school?
Thank you, Councillor Parry. This is obviously not directly related to the intake figures. It's kind of a statement by you. I don't know.
No, but I'm sorry, Provost. It is because parents are making decisions about where their kids go to school. And for those that live in Lone Head, who at this point thought that they would know where the next school were going to be, they are basing their decisions, and that is affecting the intake decisions. So it is entirely relevant, I would argue.
Be it directly or indirectly related, Fiona, could you comment on this situation?
Provost, and thank you, Councillor Parry, for your question. Clearly, in terms of agreeing the terms for the location of the new Beeslack Secondary School is taken forward by my colleague Kevin Anderson within the Place Directorate. So it's joint between Education and the Place Directorate in terms of moving this forward. Kevin, because I was on leave last week, Kevin, I know, has been pursuing this matter and will be able to provide an update from the meetings that were held last week. I ask Kevin to provide that update, Provost.
Yeah, Kevin, we'd like to comment, and also Mr. Turpie, on the question of commercial in confidence regarding the potential location.
Yes, thanks, Provost. Just to indicate to Councillor Parry that whilst there's slippage from the original programme, the slippage position hasn't impacted subsequent to the private reports to Council, so there's no additional matter there that proves problematic. Clearly, there are still legal matters that need to be concluded with the existing landowner, but we have got agreement with them that that shouldn't defer or delay stakeholder engagement, and we anticipate to be able to undertake that very shortly, because I appreciate the concerns that Councillor Parry is expressing there. There still remain commercial aspects, but I'll defer to Alan Turpie, which is why we can't go public at any stage imminently on this, I'm afraid.
Alan Turpie, would you like to comment, and then Councillor Leigh Douglas?
Thank you, Chair Boss. I'm not directly involved in the negotiations myself. I am advised that they haven't yet reached a point of conclusion. Our position is always the same, that until the heads of terms are agreed, then the matter should remain to be dealt with in private to protect both parties' positions until these are resolved. Once they are resolved, then we'll get out into the stakeholder engagement as quickly as possible.
Thank you for that reiteration of the council position as referred to by Councillor Parry. Councillor Leigh Douglas.
Thank you, Provost. Can I just go back to the topic in hand? Do we need a seconder for this? I'd like to second Jim on this. Yeah.
Thank you for that.
Okay.
At that point, is there anyone with a contrary mind in terms of the intake figures paper? There is not, and therefore, thank you, Fiona, for that presentation. Before we turn to the matters considered in private, this is, of course, the last council of this session, and I think it's only appropriate with some very long-standing councillors not standing for re-election, indeed some of who've only had one term, that we record the fact of our appreciation of the work that these councillors have done for us, and I'd therefore like to ask the group leaders in order to just make a few words before we close this public part of the meeting. Could I start with the leader, Councillor Milligan?
Yeah, thanks, Provost. Well, I want to say a few things about people who are still here. I think it's also worth remembering that when this first council first sat, Adam Montgomery sat as the Provost and was elected as Provost. And Adam still sorely missed in the work that he'd done in his community prior to him passing away. I think was invaluable. We've also seen that the likes of young Kenneth Baird, who was briefly with us for a while, moving on to other things. It certainly, when you looked at the council when that started off, it did have that different look. I'm aware that Kath's moving on, and Kath will be a great miss. And I always like the challenges back and forward with Kath, but I'm sure Colin will have a lot more to say about that. There are several other people, further groups going on. Janet, I will miss. I've enjoyed my time working with Janet. I think she's been a fantastic person to work with, very much community minded, and very much like myself and Diane, and put her political differences aside when it came to the community and worked really hard in her community. I'd like to really thank her for that. I will miss the Dorset tones for Newcastle. I think she's a Sunderland supporter, really, so. But I will miss Janet and the banter between us. I move on to my own group and John Hackett, who I think in his 5 years here, John's juggled his work life, his family life, and the community life, along with his role as a councillor and a cabinet member. And I think it just shows the amount of work you have to do when you see some of the times that John's sitting there looking quite exhausted, trying to do his work. But I'd like to just thank John for all his work and that, and I think he will be missed. Lastly, but obviously not leastly, myself and Jim Muirhead have worked together now for over 19 years, and to say we've worked closely is probably an understatement. I don't think I've ever worked as close with anybody as I have with Jim. We're very much like chalk and cheese for everybody who knows us. Jim's the sort of steady rain that goes forward, and I just sort of would like to continue galloping on there. It has been a pleasure to work with Jim, and I think he is going to be greatly missed. He's greatly respected in the council, he's greatly respected in his community, And I think as Jim moves on, it'll be missed. What I really hope is one of the things Jim's definitely brought working partnerships through the different political groups, and you can see that no less with the work that Diane Alexander, Janet Leigh Douglas and him do in the education cross-party working group, and I think it's something we could all learn from and we should all move today. Again, I would just, Jim, personally like to thank you for every piece of effort you've put in and for everything you've helped do within this council for all the population in Midlothian. Thank you and good luck in the future.
Thank you very much, Leader. And could I now ask Councillor Cassidy to make his own comments on the departing councillors?
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yep. Yeah, I'd agree with everything that Derek has said there. I think, personally, looking at the group of councillors we've had in the last 5 years, anyone who's brave enough to put their head above the parapet and take this job on as a councillor and the slings and arrows that come with it it's a very vicious environment we're working in at times, and I think the bravery shown and the courage by people that take this job on should be applauded. And I'd like to pay my respects to everyone that's not going to stand again, but I won't go through Derek said enough about everyone there, but I'd like to thank my own two group councillors, Kath Johnson, who's done 10 years and has been an outstanding councillor for her community and her constituents. She has also shown that some of the bravest acts I've ever seen from a human being in the illnesses that she's undergone in the last few years, and to have the woman would not take a day off. I used to give her a row and tell her to stop coming in, stop answering emails, but she would not lie down. She kept fighting, and I think she's probably the bravest person I've ever met in those terms. So thank you, Kath. And Joe Wallace stood in when, as Derek said, our colleague from Pennacook had a tragic exit from council, and Joe's stepped up to the mark. And I've learned so much from these two experienced councillors, and I send my personal gratitude and personal thanks. So I'll finish on that, Mark. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And finally, as leader of the Conservative group, I echo all those comments. For me, to get to know people personally was at the heart of cross-party working, and several councillors have been exceptionally good at it. As I already mentioned, the Deputy Leader of the Conservative group, Janet Leigh Douglas, with her undoubted northern charm. I was going to refer to the accent, but involved a word that ended in IE, and I'm not allowed to use those. But Janet has been absolutely wonderful. Derek is correct in identifying that Education Committee as a huge breakthrough in the relationship that we have with our communities. It's a sign that the council is progressing from the old command and control model to a much more responsive affair. Jim and Kath, of course, as you know, I live in your ward. I think you've been great councillors, and I'm sorry we'll not be seeing so much of each other, but you will be seeing something of me since I live quite nearby. Thank you all very much, councillors who will be standing down, for your contribution to this current traumatic but also in many ways successful evolution of the council at Midlothian to the digital world, and to a world where we respond and react and not just command and control. Thank you all very much indeed. Kath Johnson.
Thanks very much. It's really nice to hear all these nice words and stuff about all of us, but I'm especially grateful to everyone for being very supportive. I mean, I've gone through, I think I've had about 7 or 8 tumours, chemotherapy, sepsis, radiotherapy, ongoing chemotherapy, and still I have issues, and everyone's been most kind and helpful. The Labour Party always sent me a bunch of flowers, which was very appreciated. Colin Cassidy nipped my ear about going back to my bed and resting, etc. I hope no one ever has to go through what I've gone through, but I'm now going to be a wee bit advertising. I'm still going to be involved in Improving the Cancer Journey, and we meet every second Monday in Dalkeith Rugby Club at 1:30. If you've been affected by cancer, please come along. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Johnson. Councillor Leigh Douglas.
Sorry, I'll keep this short, but thought you might want to hear the dulcet tones one last time, guys. Just to say, I appreciate the comments. It's very kind. I do appreciate it. I didn't think I'd be emotional today, actually. I was actually quite sort of doing the skip and a jump off into the sunset. But I just would like to say a big thanks to Jim, because absolutely the cross-party working group has been fantastic. Diane too, Derek in my ward, and all the others, you know who you are, who we've worked together. John, thanks for the sort of cross-party stuff we've done. Yeah, you know, I just appreciate the comments, and hopefully the cross-party stuff will go forward with new councillors coming on board, because it's really important to, you know, for the benefit of the community. So thanks very much, guys, and I wish you all the very best.
Thank you. Blessings on us all. I think we will have the private section shortly, which you have to choose a separate link. Can I suggest that we resume at 1:45 with, I hope, the objective of being finished by 1 o'clock. So we're coming off screen now, and then at 1:45, if we could resume with the private matters. Thank you.
Promised.